Last, I'm going to talk about the choices the characters make, and some comparisons are that these characters tend to make selfish and impulsive decisions that are usually emotional and not thought through rationally, and they're not thinking of the effects of what's going to come. So some contrasts is that Araby is driven by lust for the girl next door and immaturity. He's kind of acting out of a lack of knowledge or naivety. And so, the mistakes he makes are, silly decisions where he decides to, travel on this train late at night even though the bazaar is possibly closed, and not focusing on his schoolwork because he's too caught up in thinking about this girl that he likes. And so at the end he sort of feels ashamed of it and realizes his mistakes, but it was immaturity that really drove him, mixed with this new lust, and so these are mistakes that can easily be fixed in his future, if he so chooses to do so. And then Shen Fu is kind of driven by this sort of insidious coaxing into getting involved with these sing-song girls. He initially wants to travel and earn some extra money, but when he gets there, he gets pulled into this life with these sing-song girls and feels a particular pull to one in particular, and then he ends up cheating on his wife. And so the mistakes he makes are fixable, but they're a little bit more serious than Araby's would be. Also, there's some inconsistency there because he is always having this battle in his mind between what's right and what's wrong, and then what he wants emotionally. And so he ended up making this mistake, cheating on his wife, but he seems to feel some guilt or regret towards that later on. And then on the other hand, Madame Bovary is completely driven by her own control and independence. She wants to be in charge of everything in her life, and she wants to be able to do things on her own. However, during that time period, there were many gender limitations, so she was forced into a marriage in order to escape and get some money, and she gets carried away by her irrational dreams of how things can be better, and things continue to only spiral downward for her as she makes decisions in the future, because she's only thinking about herself and her own emotions and how she's going to make choices to fulfill those wants and needs of hers. And so it eventually spirals out of control to the point where it becomes an irreparable mistake. She ends up even committing suicide towards the end and leaving her husband and her child by themselves. So these mistakes are in no way going to be fixed, which is very different from Araby and Shen, just because they could still fix things and they realize that their choices were wrong and would be more likely to take action into fixing them than Madame Bovary would.